And that leads to number 3. Most Americans just don't have a plan.
Yeah, we know from research that those who have a plan for reaching a savings goal have the ability, capacity, and actually end up saving more and more quickly than those that don't. It's amazing when you actually have a plan, when you write it down, when you put it on paper, when you actually put thought behind it. It's amazing how much more quickly the goals will manifest if you have a plan. But I think most Americans out there don't have a plan. They don't focus on it. They're not thinking about it. They're more just letting life happen to them, trying to live paycheck to paycheck.
Well, I think, and I don't even know if I agree with this study that was done, because it says 54% of Americans don't regularly financially plan. But then it says the ones who do, 30% only plan when there are major expenses. Wait a minute. Okay. So only when there's a major expense. And then 24% only when doing crisis budgeting when dealing with an unexpected expense or loss of income. This doesn't sound like a plan. This sounds like a reaction.
That's exactly right.
If you're having a crisis, if you're having a big expense come your way, like a health care or you lose your job, that is not planning. That's having to react and figure out the path forward. Guys, there is a huge difference that Americans just are not getting right.
A good plan is about thinking ahead and looking forward, not figuring out how do I deal with something that's already happened. A good plan is proactive and not reactive. Another thing that we see happens with Americans when it comes to plan is that most couples don't actually plan together. They end up attacking their financial decisions independent of one another with no communication. A study done by Fidelity said only 57% of couples say they make retirement and long-term planning decisions jointly, meaning I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, and I want you to do what you're supposed to do, and I hope that it works out. If you are attacking your finances that way, I'm going to argue that you are being inefficient and likely ineffective and ultimately moving towards your financial goals.
Look, I don't mean to sound like the old timer here who's been married 26 years, but if you've ever been to any type of counseling with money, they're going to talk to you about communication. They're going to talk about that is the biggest thing, is if you can control that inner voice inside your head, but you can also control how you discuss major topics with your spouse. How is that even possible when 57% of couples aren't making joint long-term decisions? I think we're skipping out on that very important communication tool.
We know that even when you look at when you look at the highest causes for divorce in this country, finances and financial disagreement is one of those things that always bubbles up to the top. So even if you want to set your relationship on solid foundation and set it up for long-term success, communication is key. So how do we do this better? How do we think about it? Well, this will seem silly. Create a plan. Put together a plan of action that says, okay, these are the goals that we want to achieve, and these are the steps that we're going to take to get there, and then figure out how you actually follow through with executing and carrying out that plan.
Well, I was about to accuse you of being Captain Obvious when you say how to do it better, create a plan. But in reality, we really have done a lot of content to help you know what steps or how to do it better on creating a plan. So please go check out. We have a show that came out very recently called Financial Planning 101, and it really will let you walk through by the decade. So whatever your age is and whatever spouse, it's a great tool. If y'all want to bridge that communication gap, watch this content together. Actually listen to this podcast. Well, figure out a way that y'all can actually do this and use it as a learning and teachable moment.
But in reality, creating the plan is just the first step, because the second step after you create the plan is to actually follow through with action. Have you set up your plan in such a way that you have small, digestible goals that you can work towards? If you've never budgeted before, maybe you're just going to figure out, okay, this week, here's how much we're going to spend. We're going to spend this much at the grocery store. We're going to spend this much eating out. We're going to spend this much on the mortgage. And can you do that for a week? Okay, great. Now can you do it for 2 weeks? Okay, can you do it for a month? Okay, now can we set up a savings goal? You need to actually be able to figure out how you're going to put your plan into action, or the plan ultimately is no better than the paper that it's written on. You have to make sure you create a system and a process where you can actually execute.
Now, Bo, I want to be clear, because this came up in our content meeting. You're dead in the messy middle right now.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you got 3 kids, you got a little one. So there's just a lot of noise where you're both short on time.
Yep.
Money's being pulled in all kind of directions. So when we say something like have good communication or involve your partner, you're like, yeah, that sounds great.
Sounds great.
But when am I going to make this out? And you shared a little hack that you and your wife have kind of figured out. What were you sharing in that content meeting?
In our life, we're getting pulled in 1,000 different directions all day long. And frankly, we just don't get to communicate anymore. We kind of see each other and we pass and all this stuff.
Or you're yelling at kids when you are breaking bread together.
Even when we have dinner, we sit down and have dinner, and dinner is much more about, get your foot off the table. Go sit down. Stop dancing. That's the kind of stuff that happens. One of the things that my wife and I figured out is every night we put the baby down, and while the two girls are getting ready for bed, they're brushing teeth, putting on pajamas, me and my wife go for a walk. And that walk, that time that we are together, it's just us. That's where we talk about our plans for the week. That's where we talk about our goals. That's where we talk about the important thing. In our current life circumstance, that little bit of time, maybe it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is for you, that time is so important because it allows us to recenter. It allows us to focus. It allows us to have that conversation. Now, I'm certain that as this season passes, the time and the ability for us to do that will change. But right now, we recognize that even in this messy middle, it matters that we are communicating so that we can stay on the same page so that we can keep ultimately moving towards our long-term goals.
So we just covered the lack of plan and how to create a plan.